Yikes. Welcome back. This is part 5, and I'm very surprised at how quickly these things are uploading. Usually it takes a while, so I don't know what's going on. I'm also surprised, as I said, that we're into 5 videos. It's really surprising me. I also kind of noticed in the back of my mind the title of one of these chapters was the 12 Commandments. And I realized I hadn't really talked about 12 Commandments. I went back and checked with the book here during the break. And it's because they don't really talk about the 12 Commandments. They say, oh yeah, we had the usual 10, and there were 2 others, but she didn't ask him. They stopped that regress session, and she never brings it up again. I don't know if it's an editorial mistake or if I completely missed it at the end of the book. But just so that you're not left hanging. And I don't know, it was weird. We'll worry about that tomorrow. So, chapter 23, Jesus' ministry begins. And this is now, he's a relative adult in those terms. It was mid-teens. Finished his training at the Essenes. And in this next session, Suddi says that he's in Nazareth, waiting to hear that Jesus has come back from his travels. And one of the sort of parable type things that Jesus used as a teaching technique, he liked to make things simple, easy for people to understand. He said life is like a tapestry, and you see the back of the tapestry, you see the weaving together of all the universes, and it's kind of it's not terribly understandable till you turn it to the face of the fabric, and then you see the picture drawn out, imposed on the surface of the universe, and that's your life. And that's kind of how your life is in relationship to the many universes. I thought that was really a cool description. There's a book called The Archco Volume by McIntosh and Toyman. So there's not a single word in this title that's pronounceable. It's A-R-C-H-K-O, Archco Volume. And it's by McIntosh, M-C-I-N-T-O-C-H, and Toyman, T-U-Y-M-A-N. It was written in 1887. And they were 2 characters that went to the Vatican and poked around and found information in the Vatican that had been sent there to Rome about Christ, and revealed that some of this stuff about the Essenes was true. So little tidbits are slowly coming out. His healing came from knowing how to direct energy, but the recipient also had to be ready to accept the energy. So you can't just say, I'm going to put my hand on you and heal you. Put your hand on the TV set and you'll be healed. There has to be a cooperative relationship. Both partners in this healing process have to be equally ready to meditate and direct the energy, which makes it almost necessary for you to have some of the same spiritual beliefs. And Jesus was called Yeshua. Jesus is kind of a modern thing. His name was Yeshua. He was a channel. And everybody watching this, I'm pretty sure, has a good idea of what that means. And he was able to go into meditation and access his healing energy. And that's why he's always drawn with auras and halos and lights around him. People could actually see it when he did this. So he wasn't running around having people touch the hem of his robe. He would meditate. This wasn't a sudden thing. He would meditate and he would channel this energy. And the palms of your hands are supposed to be access to healing energy. And he would do that. He would put his hands on people and be able to heal them. I suppose this is probably, I'm just guessing, probably related to Reiki, in a way. A lot of Eastern traditions that agree with this, and we're going to find out why Jesus did. The Zealots were mad that he wouldn't say, hey, to the Jews, hey, I'm your king, take up arms. He preached love, and it really irritated the daylights out of them because they knew the prophecies, and they knew that, okay, so this guy is supposed to be it. How come he's talking about love? This is not what we had expected. So According to Suddi, talking about Jesus, he says he's close to his destiny, his soul destiny. He's almost to the completion of his paths. In other words, he's an evolved spirit. This is probably his last incarnation. Suddi told of the king, Herod Antipas, and Dolores was like, who? Who is Herod Antipas? So she researched and found out this obscure information that Herod the Great was the Jewish religious leader and the king of the Jews. And he was a Roman citizen. He had Arabian blood, but he was the Jewish king. And according to Suddi and the Essenes, quote, he can't decide if he's Greek or Jew, and therefore he's not very good at either one. So he became king in 36 BC, and he died in 4 BC. He was very cruel. He murdered a lot of members of his own family. He dominated, I mean, this might sound kind of familiar. I think they lived in Manhattan, 666. He had 3 sons, Archelaus, Antipas, and Philip, and they ruled as a tetrarch. So in other words, each of them got a chunk of the land and were overseers of that particular chunk because they couldn't agree with each other and there was jostling for power, so he divvied it up. Archelaus, I'm sorry, I'm not saying it right, was banished in 6 AD. And he got banished to Judea, which was considered a third-rate province, so we'll just send him there. He could be in charge of that. And it was managed by the governor, Pontius Pilate. Philip was sent in charge of North Palestine, and Antipas was the tetrarch of a large part of Judea, the good part. And he adopted the name of Herod. So he's one of the brothers. That explains it. John the Baptist, in the meantime, was beheaded for sedition. But that's not what happened. According to Suddi, Herod was afraid that he had followers, and he wanted to hide John's message of facing one's sins. John's message was, okay, there's this guy coming who's going to talk about love, but you need to acknowledge your sins. You need to acknowledge what you've done wrong, face up to it, tell the truth, and make this different path. And Herod was stressing out about it. Well, his wife was angry because his wife, well, she wasn't his wife. The word they use in the book, so not my words, is she was his whore. And she was his professional sex worker, and she wasn't given a lot of respect. And John went on a tirade about the sins of the flesh and all that. And she was really angry because she was afraid that Herod would get brainwashed by John, start to believe him, and kick her out. So this was the core of her fear. And so what did she do? She had him beheaded. She arranged for this to happen. And she figured if she could shut John the Baptist up, Herod would come back to her and everything would be okay. So Suddi said that Oh, okay. Sorry, I wrote my notes out, not in shorthand, but kind of abbreviated sentences, and I left a really important word out, and it didn't make a lot of sense. So Suddi's talking about himself, and she has regressed him to the point of he's dead, but apparently his soul was hanging around because he wanted to see the outcome of all of this. He knew from the prophecy, he wanted to watch the prophecy unfold. So Suddi says, now I'm dead. I left the important word I'm out, and I didn't know who he was talking about. I'm sorry. So Suddi's saying, I'm dead, but still able to communicate, still aware of what's going on, not in body, but spirit, that Suddi had left Qumran and gone to Nazareth to his cousin's house and had died there of lung cancer at the age of about 53 or 54. He says we die, we learn to deal with it on a daily basis, a day-to-day basis, because it's how we live that matters, and it's important to live well as it's important to die well, and it's an important lesson to go through death. It's important for growth, and that actually people choose. I think this is kind of hard to wrap my head around. I don't know how other people feel about it. But we choose the way that you die. And there's a reason for that, because the actual mechanism of how you die is a lesson in and of itself. So let's say you die from a long, painful illness. You have chosen that for a purpose, that the way that you behave yourself, the way that you respond and interact with others and receive care and don't be demanding, and all of that is a really important lesson that you needed to learn, and an intense period of suffering was the best, quickest way to learn it, and you chose to go through that. It's a big one to wrap your head around. And then there are people who just, drop because the process of their death, the process itself, doesn't need to be a big lesson for them. It can be sudden because their life has been the lesson. It's very interesting. Once again, Suddi replies that, he died of lung cancer, which can be extremely painful, but that meditation helps with pain, that if you do it right, it can do a lot to alleviate pain. So here's what's been going on with Jesus. We're coming up to the time of his death, and here's what was going on before that, before he started preaching and ended up getting killed. There were trading posts of the Phoenicians in the north. There were trading posts in China, which was called Cathay, in India, Egypt, and Britain. And Joseph of Arimathea, Jesus's uncle, had a very successful business. He was one of the richest, and this is interesting, if not the richest man in the world at that time, in the known world, biblical world at that time. He was a tin trader, tin, T-I-N, like tin cans, and which was rare. It was as valuable as gold. The methods of mining and processing it were kept a secret, and he managed to keep it a secret. He had a huge fleet of ships, and he would attack anybody that followed him. They kept where they went secret. So Joseph took Jesus with him. Mary went too. And the story was they were going for the voyage to the different trading posts. But the reality, and everybody involved knew it, is they were Essenes, and they were going to other areas of philosophical study, ashrams, etc., to learn about other belief systems. So Jesus was born and taught in what's Israel, because at this time it was about halfway between the Eastern world and the Western world, and his message could spread most effectively that way. And the miracles that he performed were just learning how to channel energy. The back to life thing may have been near-death experience. Suddi wasn't sure. So I thought that was interesting. The issue of the virgin birth, Mary was a virgin, some weird misogynistic thing that they had to put on her. Not true. In order to conform to the archetypes of the solar cult, the virgin goddess and consort who give birth to the sun god, it has to be a virgin goddess. And that may have been why that unfolded. Jesus had many followers that were women. In fact, the majority, greater than 50% of his followers were women. But they were sent out in pairs, man and woman together, based on their astrological charts. Now, they weren't married necessarily, but their charts were studied for how well they could work together. And they sent a man and a woman together for the protection of the women, because it wasn't safe for them to go out alone. So it was really important for the issue of the crucifixion that Jesus be a good person, that he be a shining example of everything good, and he needed to be the kind of soul that every single person who met him was like, wow, he's wise and he's nice and he's kind and just all the good things. You meet somebody, you meet people and you're really struck by their energy is just a cut above. It vibrates differently. I think most of us know, we've had that experience. And that was intentional with Jesus, not because he was God, but because he was a developed soul, and they needed somebody who was going to provide a contrast. So keep that in mind. The tradition in Roman holidays was to free a prisoner. And so Pilate gave the crowd a choice. Jesus had been arrested. He'd been handed in by the Sanhedrin. The Jews, the Jews in power were like the Republican governors, same sort of situation. This self-serving, looking to further their own agendas, and willing to do corrupt things if that would get them ahead, and always wanting to kiss up to the Romans, always wanted to kiss up to whoever had power under Herod, whatever. So they arranged for this situation for Jesus to be arrested to try to ameliorate the fears of Herod. Herod was afraid that Jesus was he was like Navalny and Putin. It was that sort of a situation. We've got this revolutionary type. He's stirring up the crowds. Throw him into prison and shut him up, and out of sight, out of mind, and maybe things will calm down. Except it didn't turn out that way. So the tradition was they would take two prisoners out, and the crowd could decide in honor of the holiday to some god probably, which one do you want to be free? Aren't I benevolent? You can have one of these guys be free. So Pilate gave them a choice, Jesus or Barabbas, thinking for sure they picked Jesus because he's the nice guy that everybody likes. It's obvious he's done nothing wrong. It's clear to everybody it's a political setup. And Barabbas was this terrible guy. He'd done all kinds of crimes. Well, they salted the audience with the Sanhedrin did. They paid people to go into the crowd and yell, "Free Barabbas," and they stirred up the crowd, and Barabbas was freed. So Jesus is in jail for incitement. So the book jumps around a little bit here, and I apologize because I look at this and I think, why did they write that next? Because it's not really germane to Barabbas, but they talked about the fact that Jesus's body, disappeared from the tomb, and that was important to the narrative. It was important that people know that your body is not needed. And you have to put it in the context of the contrast with other belief systems of the time. And, the Egyptians went to all these elaborate lengths to preserve the human body because they thought you're going to need it. You're going to come back and get into that same body, which is kind of grotesque to think about. But the purpose of the Essenes was to teach people that this is, a vehicle, and it won't be needed once you die. And all this elaborate ritual, preserving bodies, all of that is completely unnecessary. And they had intended that masters, Essene masters, alive and Essene masters passed on, worked together in tandem. This is what Suddi said, worked together in tandem so that when Jesus's body was put in the sepulcher, they turned it to dust. They accelerated with energy the process of decomposition and turned it to dust. And that's what happened. I think that's fascinating. So they had assigned Roman guards. I kind of skipped over the whole story of the actual physical crucifixion because it pretty much was the way we've heard a million times. I think there's kind of a morbid, sort of sadistic, weird curiosity about that story. It's a brutal death. And, George Carlin is my favorite comedian. And he said the funniest thing. I think this is the appropriate place to tell this joke. I don't often repeat this joke. It offends people horribly. He said, if Jesus had lived in modern times, all these Christians would be running around with little electric chairs around their necks. I'm sorry if I offend you. It's meant in the spirit of fun. I think Jesus would laugh. I think he had to have had a sense of humor. So they established Roman guards and Jewish guards outside his tomb to watch each other and to watch the tomb, because all of these stories were circulating and they were afraid that somebody was going to steal Jesus's body and then the stories would start. So they guarded it very, very carefully. But the masters didn't need to be there to have this happen, and they disintegrated his body into dust. This is what Suddi said, an Essene who was there. So in the morning, the women came, and what they came to do was to re-oil the body. It was sort of a tradition. You did it once, and then you came back again and did it one more time. And what they had to unseal the tomb. The guards were there. No stone was rolled back. There was no angel. There was no fire. None of that was true. That was manufactured later. Suddi said that they rolled the stone away. They unsealed it because it had been sealed. I don't know, maybe wax or something. And it was completely empty except for the linen he'd been wrapped in. And his body needed to be gone to show people that there was life after death, that your body was not important. So then what happened? In concert with his body disappearing, he started to appear to people. People started seeing him as this being of light. His soul started appearing to people, doubting Thomas. Remember that story? To get the message across, he appeared to the women. He appeared to doubting Thomas. He appeared up at the Last Supper place too, I think. I think he did. And I think it's been a while since I've read the Bible. But the point, it really doesn't matter. That's not the issue. The real important thing to argue about is, why did that happen? And it happened because they wanted this contrast. They wanted a really good person that people could totally relate. They could feel in their gut. This is goodness. And they wanted a brutal ending at the hands of monsters for the contrast. But they wanted to, there was another part of the message, which was, his body is gone. You don't need it, but what do you have? You have the light body. And they were hoping it was kind of a living parable, that this would make such an impression on people that they would realize, oh, you follow the way, the Essene path of love, you die, doesn't matter. If you've been good, that's all that counts. Your body is immaterial. It's kind of a contradiction, but your body is unimportant. And what really matters is the existence of the soul after your body has returned to dust. And that was his message. That was his job. This is the way. I am the light. So simple. And somehow they've managed to muck it up so that now we have Greg Abbott and Ron Johnson telling us how to live our lives. I just don't understand it. So Jesus was seen as the light by all the apostles, and eventually the ascension into heaven. And I always say it's lucky that Jesus ascended into heaven, body and soul. Wasn't really a body and soul, because if he would have been buried and he was still around, he'd be spinning in his grave to see what people do in his name. He ascended to a higher plane. He didn't die for our sins. You cannot die for the sins of others. Nobody can die for the sins of others. God, the angry God, the God of the Jewish Old Testament, who tells people to murder their children, that God would be the kind of God who would say, here, my son, go die and prove a point. That's not what happened. He was an ascended spirit who volunteered to come and show people love and the way, called himself the way, and to be this example of a life well lived. And a contrasting horrible death, as you can't understand white unless you've got black to compare it. You can't understand brightness unless you've got darkness. You need the opposites to really show the contrast. And that was kind of the purpose, was to show this badness. This badness gets you nowhere, because look, he's still alive. Here's his spirit of light, and it's okay. It's totally okay. So that was the message. It was about reincarnation. It was about a life well lived. It was about love. It was about the futility of trying to kill love, because it will be reborn. It will live again. So he died to show that the dead rose above that, and that the ridiculous way he was treated, the horrible way he was treated, and his punishments didn't matter, because his soul survived. And he was willing to take it to show us not to fear it. So this was all part of the message. It had nothing to do with atoning for the Garden of Eden, which wasn't called the Garden of Eden. It had nothing to do with Eve being terrible and eating an apple. It had nothing to do with the original sin that women brought to humanity. It had nothing to do with any of that. He treated women as equals. He respected women as half of the yin and the yang, an imperfection unless together. And I get all worked up. I'm sorry. So, you pay for your own sins by having to reincarnate. Nobody else can pay for them for you. You have to do it yourself. And it's not paying for it. It's learning the lessons you didn't learn. And you have to endure what you've made. Others endure because of you. You have to endure it. It doesn't... somebody else is not going to come along and sacrifice himself to save you. It doesn't work that way. People have totally misinterpreted the message. He is not to be worshipped. He's not to be deified. We are all part of God. He was no more or less part of God than we are. He is to be emulated. And he's a spirit guide to guide people to enlightenment, to help us to be more spiritual in our perceptions. He's a helper, a guide, an example, and it is wrong to deify him. It's wrong to make him a god. He would say, never follow anybody blindly, question authority, think for yourself. The quintessential hippie, I'm telling you. Think things out for yourself. There is no devil. There are two parts inside of each of us. There's the part that encourages you to do the wrong thing, that little voice, and there's the other part that encourages you to think, and you have a choice. It's your two of swords every single day. You can decide to do the wrong thing or the right thing. Which voice are you going to listen to? The cartoons weren't far off. But you need to especially think about the repercussions of how your actions affect other people. That was one of his big messages. And this truth might make you sad, and all truths might make you sad. And the truth and the reality of current events might be very painful. We're all freaking out. I mean, we're freaking out. But deep inside, we know that it's the truth, and we know what good is, and we know what right is, and light, and we know how love should look, and we know the way. We know it. Instinctively, babies are born knowing this. We knock it out of them with our behaviors. We're all born knowing this because it's part of us. And if it's bad, if it causes harm, it's not good. It's really simple. So Christ will reincarnate, and he'll reincarnate as a human being, and he'll be an even greater example of good. And, you know, there's not going to be another crucifixion. There's not going to be the dead rising out of graves and thunder and lightning and earthquakes and stuff. No, it's not like that. He's going to reincarnate as a person who will help to lead whoever's around to good. And some people will recognize who he is. And most of us won't. Well, we won't be here. We might be here as somebody else, but we're, probably not going to recognize it. But we're all created at the same time from the same source of perfection. We all came here to experience life and to try to return to that perfection by living life and learning lessons. And we're trapped in a physical body, and we forget where we came from, and we get stuck in this wheel of karma because while we're here we do bad things, and we have to fix it, and then we do more bad things, and we have to fix it, and it's really hard. And he came as like a kind of like a slap in the face, like, hey, you guys, wake up. This is how you should be. These bad things that are happening to me, this is how you should not be. But in the end, inevitably, this spirit of light, this is what you will be. So he came to show us that we could rise above the physical world and take this role model of love and not have negative karma. And the point was that the point was not about his death, and it was not about his suffering. It was about the way he lived his life and his message of eternal life. And it's the eternal life of you, of your soul. And the point was the contrast between his life of love and his debased behavior of the people who killed him. Not his debased behavior, the debased behavior of the people who killed him. He saved mankind by showing us how to break out of a cycle of negative karma and ascend. That's really what it was about. And it was meant to show that the physical world is not everything. The eternal soul lives. That the empty tomb showed that some power from the other side prevailed. And his reappearance as a light being showed that your soul lives on. So Joseph, this is a little side story. Joseph of Arimathea, his uncle, took his body to Joseph's own sepulcher because you had to release the body of these criminals to family and they had to be buried right away. So he volunteered, and he was the younger brother of Mary's father, her uncle. And he was the tin guy, and he had a huge fleet of ships and traveled all over the world. And tin was very expensive because it was used to help make bronze. He had the largest fleet in the world. He was a member of the Sanhedrin. So now Joseph, Jesus' father, had died, and Joseph of Arimathea was his guardian because he was his oldest male relative, and that's why he took him with him. They went to sea, and here we go. Dan Brown, he's going to love to hear this. I bet he read Dolores Cannon, because they went to Britain. They went to the island, the English island, not called England in those days. He went to Britain, and it was called the Tin Island. And especially around Cornwall, there were tin mines. And the Phoenicians had been the original inhabitants of Britain. And they first went to Cornwall and mined for tin 4,000 years before Christ. And they would wreck ships that followed them. And that's what Joseph of Arimathea did. They wrecked anybody who tried to follow them. He kept it secret. That's how he got rich. And he was redheaded and blue-eyed and tall, and so was Jesus. And some believe that these were attributes that came originally from Atlantis. And it's believed that before the flood in England, there was a very advanced civilization that had very high level science and metallurgy, which is why they knew about tin. And part of Britain is a surviving part of a tip of the part of the continent of Atlantis. It's believable. Since 1800 BC, the Druids have been in Glastonbury, which is a holy city for them. And it actually, long ago in that area, there were very developed, sophisticated cities, libraries, 40 universities. Some of them had 60,000 students at one university. London was founded 270 years before Rome. London's been around a long time. The Druidic beliefs have common roots with Judaism, and they were also looking for a Messiah called Yesu. The Druids were an offshoot of the Jews that came to England in ancient times. So you had this weird migration of cultures, and that's why there's so many similarities. The Druids had a mystery school with the Kabbalah. They studied philosophy, astronomy, math, geometry, law, medicine, poetry, oratory. And in his travels with Joseph of Arimathea, Jesus intentionally attended mystery schools in India, China, Britain. He learned from the Druids. He learned from the Indian mystics. He learned Buddhist beliefs. Which a lot of what he says that he brought back with him, meditation techniques and healing techniques. Some of the things he learned to do, like turning water into wine, it had to do with chemistry, and he learned it in his travels. So after his death, his followers still feared they would be hunted by Rome. Joseph of Arimathea was too rich and powerful to be killed outright. Rome was after them. And he was too rich to really do too much about. So what they decided to do was set him adrift in a boat. So they got a ship and they put him in the boat with the three Marys, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of Jesus, and that other Mary of Mary and Martha. Martha was there. And people whose names may or may not mean anything: Marcella, Sarah, and 12 disciples, including Lazarus, Maximum. Now, when I say 12 disciples, I don't mean the original 12 apostles. There's an overlap, but it's not all of them. Lazarus, Maximum was the guy who he restored the eyesight to in the Bible. Salome, the wife of Zebedee, the mom of James and John. So the apostles John and James were brothers. Their mother, her name was Salome. She was married to a guy called Zebedee, and he had died, and she went with Jesus. Somebody called Eutropius, I think he was a freed slave. I could be wrong about that, but I think he was. And a handful of other people. His followers, they were put on a ship and set adrift, and they thought that would be the end of them. Well, interestingly, the boat got caught on a current and pulled along the coast of France and landed in Britain. And they found their way to the Druids and had some commonalities because the cultures had some similarities. And Joseph of Arimathea is the person who founded the first Christian church. Of course, they didn't call themselves Christians. They called themselves the Way. And they weren't called Christians till 250 AD by the Roman Church. They always tried to keep the number of disciples at 12 to honor the original followers of Jesus. Joseph of Arimathea lived 50 years after Jesus died. Mary was buried at the site of the old church at Glastonbury that's no longer there. The Apostle John was the last one to die. He was 101. On Joseph of Arimathea's grave, there's a marker that said, I quote, "I came to the Britons after I buried Christ. I taught, I rest." So one last little tidbit, which cracks me up, and personally I would debate this, but even if it's true, so what? This is the supreme brag of the ultimate eugenicists. The royal family of Britain claims they are direct descendants from Joseph of Arimathea. And that is the end of the book, Jesus and the Essenes by Dolores Cannon. And I just was trying to look at comments and respond to people between uploads. And this uploaded so quickly. They all uploaded so quickly that I really didn't have time. But I did read 2 or 3 comments, and people seemed really happy to get for me to do this book. I'm so pleased. I never, I don't know if what I'm going to read is going to appeal to other people. And eventually, I'm going to have a dud. That's going to happen. But in the meantime, I suppose I should ask the cards a question. I have a couple of minutes. Ask a small question. It's a big question. Let's ask one question, and we'll do a full Celtic cross on it. Let's ask Dolores Cannon, was she really regressing people? And were they really narrating the stories of their past lives under hypnosis? Now, any questions I ask, I'm not challenging the veracity. I'm confirming. I'm just, I just want to know. And Dolores, she's out there somewhere. Maybe she'll guide us, I do believe that when you invoke somebody's name, they hear it and they pay attention, and maybe she can help us to get some truth. We'll know the truth when we see it, right? So, was this whole story that came out of this young woman, was this truly the channeling of her past life? Suddi the Master. Oh, wow. I don't know what to make of this. So, the first card we get is Temperance, the angel of truth and light, which, to me that says, yes, this is a true story. And I think this is Dolores Cannon. I really do. The description, the Queen of Wands, this is an intuitive queen. This is somebody of strength and character and knowledge and balance, with temperance, vibrant, magnetic, determined, good advice. I take this as a yes. But then the reading starts to get really odd. So over it all in the sky, I get the 9 of Wands. And I think this is talking about hesitancy. This is talking about wanting these stories to come forward and having the doubts and the reception of many people being challenging and questioning and dubious, like, come on. I mentioned this to a couple of people, that I know in the neighborhood, and they They all think I'm completely out of my mind. And I tell them these stories about these books and things we read cards about. And I know they're amused and it's entertaining for them, but they think I've lost a few marbles sometimes. This is interesting, and I think this is really an important card. I have an immediate gut reaction to this card. Three of Swords reversed. Now, this could look negative. It's only negative in this one sense. This is the foundation. And I think what this is saying is don't spend a lot of time focusing on the past. Don't think a lot about old hurts and old troubles and old griefs. And it's okay to look at these past life regressions if you're using it to try to figure out something that, a health issue or some, I don't know, habit or something that you just can't seem to break from, then it's okay, because that may very well be the connection. But to become hyper-focused on the past is to lose sight of the future. I just strongly feel that's what this is saying. Because look, the past is hard work. The past is all these lessons that we have had to learn. Each one of these wands is a lifelong struggles. And life is hard. And life is lessons. You don't learn from the easy stuff. You learn from the hard stuff. And in the future, don't expect it to be easy. That's why I said this reading, it's really interesting. It's going to be a battle. It's going to be losses and defeats and tension and strife. It's not all going to be bad. That's not what it's saying. But it's saying that it's going to be lesson after lesson. That this is what you have to look forward to. That this is the angel of truth and the angel of light. And Dolores Cannon, in her wisdom and her ability to connect, is saying, yes, you can look at these things and learn from these lessons, these struggles that you had. But don't expect that's going to make everything dandy, because you're going to face more. It's going to be hard. Life is hard. And justice reversed. Here we are. We're caught in this cycle of red tape and no accountability and unfairness. And all the world is just full of challenges to our efforts to progress. But we can do it. And how do I know that? The King of Swords. This is about truth. This is about clearly being able to see the way. If anything, this would be about Jesus. This is about an advisor, authority and a power, an intelligent, determined, and alert man. This is guidance. This is the law. And what is the law? It's the way. Love one another. So simple. And here's the hope that we're going to figure it out, that we're going to take in this law. We're going to hold up the sword of truth. We're going to use that guidance. And we really see this outcome. This outcome is really interesting. The Six of Wands reversed. Now, this could feel negative. I don't think this is negative. I think what this is saying is you are going to try, and you're going to fall, and you're going to get up and do it again. And why is that going to happen? Because we're always challenged by the devil. I love this. We're challenged by the hardships of life. That's the school. That's the lesson. So very quickly, because now it's getting late and this thing's going to shut down. If it shuts down, that'll be the end of it, because it's been a long day. And I may or may not do more readings tonight on the cards. I probably won't. I'll save them for tomorrow. I don't want to torture everybody. So this will be the last reading for tonight. And this is a quick, just a clarifier on this devil and Six of Wands reversed, which would seem like a bleak outcome. It's a realistic outcome. Life is hard, and then we die. And what we do in this lifetime is really where it's at, because at the heart, the angel of truth and light, balance. So the journey is hard. This is about the journey. You're not going to believe this. I just can't believe that. That's so interesting. Oh, and look. Okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop while I'm ahead. So, struggle between good and evil. I mean, this is life in a nutshell. The struggle between good and evil, and the decisions you make. That's what it's all about. You know what? To quote a famous man, love is all you need. So thank you all very much for watching. I know that was a lot. You don't have to watch them all tonight. There's no test in the morning. Just enjoy them. And I think I will come on tomorrow night and we'll do cards on this. I'll think about this a lot tomorrow. Send me your questions for the cards. Put them in big print so that they catch my eye, because I get a lot of comments. I try to answer them all. Sometimes I miss them and I really apologize. I'll find out 2 weeks later that I missed one, so I apologize. So far, I don't have so many viewers that I have overwhelming numbers of comments, and I will try to respond to everybody. The goal is a day is going to come when we have so many viewers that I just can't do that anymore. So thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you all very, very much. I feel like there's been a lot of support out there amongst everybody, for everybody, between everybody. In the past few days, I think women are there for each other, and this is going to continue. We're not going to drop the ball on this. We're going to stay strong. I have a couple of tricks up my sleeve in the next few weeks, and in the meantime, have a nice Sunday evening, and slán go fóill and slánte.